Let's listen.
Welcome to Man on the Street, brought to you by Showtime Detroit Clothing in Hamtramck. Check them out at their location on Joseph Campo in Hamtramck. Dan, the owner, has been dressing Detroit bands, performers, and artists since 1989. And he just doesn't dress performers and artists. He can dress you too. He has something for everyone. So as Dan would say, check it out. Showtime Detroit Clothing in Hamtramck. I'm here today with a drummer, an author, an all-around talented, nice guy too, and now a podcaster, and that's what we're going to be talking about here today on the show. And guess what? He is the first alumni of Man on the Street to return and visit us again for another episode. It's Mr. Robert Crenshaw. Robert, thank you for joining me today on Man on the Street. How are you?
All right. Well, Jamie, it's great to be back, Star City, here on Man on the Street. So thanks for having me, always, like I said, always a thrill.
Robert, thank you for letting me listen to a couple episodes of the podcast titled My Mythological Narrative, same as your book. And I wanted to ask you really, because my mind went right away listening to it. It's very good, by the way. It's produced at a very high level. But I wanted to ask you, it reminded me so much of that show that we all grew up with watching, The Wonder Years. And you being that the narrator and that character like a Kevin Arnold, reliving your adolescence in the 1960s. And that's the feel I got from it. Tell me, am I on mark with that?
Well, since the time period is about the same, and I'm reflecting back on the past, then it's similar. But, a couple of episodes into this thing, there's a lot more sex, drugs, and rock and roll than I think that there were on the Wonder Years. So, in that part, that it's different. So, I started to get courageously stupid, as I got older. And so, I just did wilder and wilder stuff, as I got older, And one of the really nice things about being a musician is your adolescence lasts until you're like 35 years old. So, so there are some similarities, but, it kind of veers off in a different direction after a while.
At the beginning of the podcast, the episodes that I listened to, you gave kind of a scorecard or a lineup card of who is involved production-wise and music-wise with the podcast. And can you tell us, because I heard quite a few people with the last name Crenshaw listed, which makes me happy because it means a lot of talented people. But can you tell me who are the players? Who's involved in the podcast, music-wise and production-wise?
So the principal actors, in this principal contributors are Don Dixon and Marty Jones. Don Dixon has actually done a fair amount of acting. He was in this it was in this movie called Camp, which was on HBO, which is kind of a big deal. And Marty's wife, Marty Jones, was a singer. She was signed to A&M Records and made some really, really great records. I also have Don Jones, who's played on every record that I ever made. And then I've got connected to this woman named Jill Bartlett, who has like 41 IMDb credits, including like Disney stuff. And also she does tons of voiceovers, and she's a great writer as well. Also Jamie Hoover and Graham Mabey. So Graham, plays both of Joe Jackson, and then Jamie Hoover, I've made a lot of records with him, and all around really, really talented guy, super talented. Then I have my brother Mitchell, who wrote a piece about the Berkeley Theater, and going to see movies there. And then also John Crenshaw is kind of like the producer. And what his job is to make everything that I do 20% better. right? So that's what his responsibilities are. And then also his daughter Leah does some voiceover work on it, and his granddaughter Evelyn did some voiceover work on it. So it's kind of lousy with Crenshaw's, you know. You can't just really swing a dead cat without hitting Crenshaw.
When listening to the couple episodes I did, the meat, the bulky part of the podcast is the stories that you tell, where you're kind of this Kevin Arnold character. And I love it because you talk about, it really tells the story of the first time a young person in their adolescence goes to a record store, the first time a young person that's a musician goes to a music store and sees instruments, or the first time a young kid goes with their friends to the movies alone. And so it was exciting. And I love the part where you talk about, I don't know if you call them vignettes or stories in your podcast, but you are about 5 or 6. You go to the Berkeley Theater, the Berkeley on 12 Mile there in Berkeley, with your friends to see this scary movie. And you're sitting there and this lady gets stabbed in the movie and you jump up, freaked out, run all the way back up out of the theater. And I just love that. It seemed like right out of a script of a movie. And then there's another cute part where you and your brother Mitchell are at church with your family in the pews, slapping each other around. Your mom has to put a stop to that. But I'm just wondering, am I right about that those kind of stories will be the meat of the podcast as you move forward?
So that movie that I was talking about, it's called The Old Dark House, directed by William Castle, right? And he did like Homicidal and all these like great scary movies, you know, that just scared the crap out of people, you know, especially little kids. So, you know, I was really young, and in that movie there's a scene where this woman, you know, gets murdered and she has these knitting needles sticking through her neck, but she has this gigantic smile on her face. So as soon as I saw that smile, I was like, whoa, I gotta get out of here, and ran out of the theater. And then for the rest of the movie, I was like at that, you know, like in the aisle, standing next to the seat, so in case I had to run out again, you know. So, but you know, that's a wonderful memory, you know. And anybody who has, you know, who got really scared at movies, you know, I'm hoping that they can identify, you know, with it. And then same thing with like going to the music stores were like a big thrill for us when we were kids, you know. It was like, you know, all these shiny new kinds of things, you know, and they always seemed like, because every one of us wanted to be a musician, like, you know, little doors of opportunity that might opened up for us, you know, one day. So that was, you know, my parents were like incredibly supportive of us, and so that was just, you know, a really nice part of my childhood, you know, and hopefully some other people have similar things like that where their parents were very supportive of their musical, you know, escapades.
I really feel like the podcast will connect with people. I hate to say it, but 50 and up especially, because those are the people that grew up in the 60s and the 70s. And I love how because I watch a lot of rock documentaries and music documentaries, and you talk about in one of the episodes how you and these friends who maybe, you know, you had total different political beliefs and things, but everybody came together music-wise because everybody, after they saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, wanted to be in music, wanted to start a band. And all in the documentaries, all the people talk about the same thing. And I really love that, how you talked about how the people can come together talking about music. You know, they hear Rubber Soul for the first time back in the day, or Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys, and they could talk about that and get excited about that together, even they're so different. So I was wondering, as you move forward, will that be a running theme, because you and your family are so musical, that music does really bring people together?
Well, one of the things that I read about as far as the Beatles, you know, and that being such an influential thing, is that, you know, the assassination of John Kennedy and the Beatles on Ed Sullivan were about 3 months apart. And, you know, when Kennedy got assassinated, I think, you know, everyone was just, you know, devastated by it. And, you know, it's like even kids, you know, they could tell their parents were like, oh, my God, what's going to happen to the country now, you know? And then when we saw the Beatles, it was like suddenly okay to be like happy and see these amazingly talented creatures that came across the sea, to come and entertain us. So, I mean, I think that was one of the components of why the Beatles just took over. And, we needed it so bad at that time, to happen. And then as, all my life, even when I was in kindergarten or, the first grade, if I talked to someone and they loved the Beatles, and I knew that we were going to be friends, and like any rock band, it's like I can make a few assumptions about them, because of that. And usually, it's like I knew that I was going to talk to them again.
I really want to tell you, Marianne,
Both episodes that I listened to, I loved it because they had a song in there that you wrote when you were 17, Everyone's in Love with You. And your brother Marshall did a rendition of that and put it out on his 1998 album, The 9-Volt Years. So Marshall Crenshaw fans know that song. So I was really happy when I heard it through both episodes. And I was just wondering, because also there's a great song in there that I believe you wrote, and you're doing the vocals on it. It's about the Detroit Lions winning the Super Bowl. Obviously fiction, but maybe not, who knows. But that was great. That was a great song, too. It was fun to listen to. I'm just wondering, as you move forward with more episodes, what's the direction of the music? Will it be, just the original stuff you put out? Will there be other Crenshaws involved singing and playing? Will there be any Marshall Crenshaw music in it? Where are you going with this music-wise?
There'll be songs in every episode, if not by me, by other people, in the cast. But to the two songs that you mentioned, I wrote that song, as you said, when I was a kid, and I used to work at this rehearsal studio in New York, and one time I was in there, me and Marshall were working on something, and I played the piano and he played the drums. And then we took it back to his house, and he had a 4-track tape recorder, and he added other instruments and percussion and stuff like that. And then that ended up on the 9-Volt Years, which is like, go figure. But, later on, that song, this guy named Jeff Fosscat recorded a version of it. And Jeff Fosscat, he played with Brian Wilson for a really long time, and was like in the Beach Boys, for a while as well. And so when he recorded a version of it, I was like thrilled. And then also the version that he did was really great. And one of the things was like the bass sound was like just killing me. So I asked him, well, what did you do? And he said, well, my friend Brian does this thing where he takes a Fender Precision bass and plays the bass line and then doubles it with a 6-string Dan Electro bass, right? So that's what we did. But I love that he name dropped, Brian Wilson.
The podcast, tell us about when it will be coming out, because you told me pretty soon here you're going to unleash it on the world, which is going to be very exciting. It's very good, people. You got to see. Well, you got to hear it. It's audio. It's not like man on the street camera shot. But when will it be out? Also, what platform will it be on? How can people find it? And how often will the episodes be released? Weekly, monthly?
So the podcast officially comes out on the 16th of this month, which is April. And I know that it's going to be on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and YouTube Podcasts. And I know that there's others, but, it's like I just checked a box and there was like 25 things listed or, 10 things listed. So that's, what it is. And then for the first few of them are definitely going to be weekly. But like I said, I got to make more, right? So so some of them might be 2 weeks apart for the last, couple of them. But, I really think that this is good enough that it's going to have a long life, and I guess we'll see, because if nothing else, we're really having a lot of fun, making the episodes.
really wanna tell you
The question right now is, what will you be doing musically? Do you have anything musically planned for this summer outside of the podcast? Do you play with anybody? Are you making any records? What's going on with you musically?
So a couple of people have asked me to play drums on some stuff, and it doesn't take a lot of kale to get me to play, on something, because it's just fun for me. And then mostly everything that I'm doing other than that has to do with this podcast, because like I said, you have to write a lot of background music for it, and then also, we are recording songs, and I'm getting those guys to play on them for cover songs and for new songs, and so I would say that most of my musical stuff, is involved in that podcast, unless someone reaches out to me about playing on something. So that's it. But thanks, man. This has really been fun. We'll do it again sometime.
I want to thank Robert Crenshaw for joining me today on Man on the Street, and you can check him out at mymythologicalnarrative.com. That's where you'll find the podcast. It starts April 16th, so make a note on that. And you can also check out some of his merch on there. There's things to purchase, his records, so you'll definitely want to check out that website. And you can check me out on the next episode of Man on the Street right here and on villageradio.net, my show Man on the Street, Monday through Friday, 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern, 3 to 6 Pacific. Your choice for classic alternative anywhere on earth. We'll see you next time, everybody.